Welcome fans. What happens when a cancelled flight and a storm shatter sensible plans, and salvation arrives in the form of a commanding stranger with secrets in his eyes? You're about to meet Elara, and you won't believe where her layover is taking her. Hit that subscribe button and prepare for a journey where the most powerful man in the world just might be the most dangerous. The downpour was relentless. Not a gentle shower but a tropical storm unleashing its fury against the glass wall of the terminal. Each deluge sounded like a drumbeat, an angry rhythm matching the panic tightening around my chest. My phone, sticky with condensation from my frantic grip, displayed the cruel single word, DELAYD, not once but for the 5th time. The meticulously planned trip to my sister's surprise engagement party in the Caribbean was now sinking faster than the luggage on the tarmac. A frustrated sigh escaped me, thin and ragged, before I could bite it back. I was Elara, a freelance graphic designer whose life was usually a neat grid of deadlines and color palettes. My biggest crisis was usually a client who insisted on Comic Sans font. This was cosmic mockery. I pushed my forehead against the cool, slick glass, the airport's fluorescent lighting reflecting my own image back. A frazzled mess with dark curls escaping a messy bun, wearing a sensible, yet now miserably damp denim jacket. I was a practical, independent woman, yet here I was, trapped in this sterile, echoing vault, smelling of stale air and cheap coffee, watching the storm drown my plans. The loudspeaker crackled to life, a voice of false cheer slicing through the gloom. Attention all passengers. Due to continued severe weather, all flights are now grounded until further notice. We apologize for the inconvenience. Inconvenience? It was a catastrophe. That ticket was non-refundable, my sister's party was tonight, and the profound, isolating silence of being utterly stranded was crushing me. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing a sudden clearing of the skis, a magical airlift. When I opened my eyes, the scene outside was a watery blur, except for one stark anomaly. Tucked away on a distant apron, far from the huddled commercial giants, sat a jet of impossible elegance. It was a deep matte onyx black, its silhouette cutting through the downpour like a predator. It was a clear, arrogant symbol of a world where severe weather was a problem someone else handled. I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound, of course. While I was here worrying about my credit card bill and a cold aluminum bench, some elite few were likely airborne, sipping vintage wine, utterly unconcerned by the chaos below. I peeled myself away from the window, the cold seeping into my bones. My small, battered roller bag felt like it was filled with lead. There was no point in staring at my misfortune. I needed to find a corner, any corner, where I could just power down and wait for the nightmare to end. As I stumbled through the vast, abandoned concourse, the emptiness swallowed me whole, and the weight of my solitude became a physical ache. My breath caught in shallow, useless gasps. I was lost, alone, and the panic threatened to consume every last rational thought. Just then, a voice, deep and smooth as aged whiskey, cut the silence. "Are you in need of assistance, miss?" I spun around, startled. Standing just yards away, framed by the muted light of an unused gate, was a man. He was tall, overwhelmingly so, radiating an effortless, controlled power that made every hair on my arm stand on end. His shoulders were impossibly broad beneath a charcoal suit tailored to an almost unnatural degree, and his posture was one of absolute command. He didn't just stand, he dominated the space. I'm perfectly fine," I stammered, the lie transparent, pathetic, hanging between us like a fragile pane of glass. He took a slow, deliberate step closer, and I could finally make out his face. Dark, near-black hair was swept back from a strong, uncompromising profile. His eyes, the color of polished amber, fixed on me with an intensity that demanded attention and simultaneously made me want to flee. They held a strange, unsettling blend of concern and something ancient, something that made the terminal's temperature feel like it just dropped a few degrees. This was not a man who ever waited for anything. This was a man who commanded the tides. "You look distressed," he stated, his voice a low, melodic rumble. Distress was putting it mildly. I felt like a bedraggled bird, and he looked like a king in exile. "My flight was cancelled," I mumbled, gesturing vaguely at the darkness outside. "I was supposed to reach my sister." A flicker of something unreadable. Was it empathy, pity, crossed his amber eyes? He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. The weather is proving difficult for commercial travel. I too am waiting for a clearance. He subtly gestured toward the private apron, toward the sleek black jet I had just been admiring. My arrangements, however, are slightly less constrained. My breath hitched. Not just a rich man, the owner of the black behemoth, the man for whom this storm was a minor scheduling annoyance. The thought was crushing. He had an escape and I was stranded, utterly pathetic. He watched my expression, those amber eyes missing nothing. A faint, knowing curve touched the corner of his lips. It appears we are both victims of fortune, Miss Vanya. My name is Elara Vanya. Elara, he repeated, the name sounding foreign, almost a caress on his tongue. He extended a hand, large, strong, and impeccably manicured. I am Kaelen Thorne. Kaelen Thorne. The name was a statement of pedigree and power. I tentatively placed my hand in his. His grip was firm, warm, and unexpectedly gentle. A jolt, like a surge of pure electricity, shot up my arm, making me snatch my hand back as if burned. He merely raised a dark, elegant eyebrow, a hint of amusement in his gaze. Given the unfortunate circumstances, he said, his voice dropping to a persuasive, almost hypnotic pitch, and assuming your destination is anywhere along the southern route, I might be able to offer a temporary solution. My heart hammered against my ribs. A solution? Was he offering me a seat on that jet? The idea was so ludicrous, so far outside the bounds of my reality that it felt like a hallucination. My logical brain was a blaring siren. Danger, stranger danger. I was a graphic designer. I didn't get into private jets with powerful strangers, no matter how magnetic their amber eyes were. But then I thought of my sister, the surprise ruined, the loneliness of another night spent in this fluorescent purgatory. This was my one improbable chance. What kind of solution? I managed, my voice barely a thread. My eyes flickered between the dark storm outside and the dangerous, compelling man before me. He was my last insane hope. The tension stretched between us, thick and palpable, the unspoken question, is this salvation or a trap, hanging heavy in the air. I braced myself for his answer, knowing that whatever it was, my life was already irrevocably changed. Chapter 1. What kind of solution? I repeated, the question a desperate, foolish whisper. Kaelen Thorne's amber eyes seemed to bore into my soul, dissecting every anxious tremor. The airport's eerie silence amplified the frantic pulse in my own ears. He took another slow, deliberate step towards me, and the subtle scent of rich leather and something wilder, like a northern forest in winter, enveloped me, intoxicating and unnerving. My jet, he said, the words a low, velvety rumble, is heading south towards San Juan as soon as we get the green light. If your final destination, or a viable connecting city, is along that route, I can offer you passage. My jaw slackened. Passage on his private jet. It was an absurdity beyond measure, a scene ripped straight from one of the cheesy romance novels I occasionally binged. Elara Vanya, the practical, sensible designer, being offered a ride by a titan of industry. It was impossible, and yet completely irresistible. But why? I stammered, the only logical question I could form. Why would a man like him, radiating wealth and power, offer charity to a stranded nobody like me? A flash of sharp, knowing amusement touched his lips. An act of unexpected goodwill, Miss Vanya, he said, the words smooth as fine silk, yet carrying an edge of mockery. Or perhaps simple boredom. Even the most efficient travel is tedious when one is confined, and I find myself without company. A distraction, even a temporary one, would be tolerable. My internal alarms blared. Boredom and goodwill felt too flimsy, too dangerous. Things that sound too good to be true generally are. But then I remembered my sister's face, the party I was missing, the cold reality of another night on a terminal bench. The gleaming private jet promised escape and salvation. My sister is in St. Lucia, I finally managed, the words catching in my dry throat. It's near San Juan, not exactly the same, but I trailed off, feeling foolishly exposed. Kaelen Thorne nodded slowly, his gaze unwavering. St. Lucia is a simple connecting flight from San Juan. We can arrange for an immediate transfer upon arrival. Consider it part of the arrangement. Arrangement, the word made my stomach clench. What did this arrangement cost? Yet looking into his eyes I saw no obvious malice, just a commanding intensity, a sheer, unyielding resolve that paradoxically made me trust him despite every warning bell. He wasn't charming, he was powerful, and in my current state of helplessness that power was a strange source of comfort. I don't know what to say, I whispered, the enormity of the offer washing over me. I have no way to pay you back. He dismissed the notion with a small wave of his hand, a gesture that spoke volumes about his wealth. Payment is not required, Miss Vanya, merely your company. His gaze held mine, and for a fleeting instant I felt a strange heat spread through me. So do we have an accord? My mind raced. This was reckless, utterly insane. But what was the alternative? Maury despair. I looked out at the pouring rain, then back at Kaelen, his imposing figure a beacon in the desolate terminal. This was my chance. Yes, I breathed the word, a tiny leap of faith. Yes, Mr. Thorne, we have an accord. A slow, utterly predatory smile curved his lips, and a shiver not entirely unpleasant ran down my spine. Excellent, then follow me. We will wait in my lounge until the skis permit. He turned and strode away, his pace long and purposeful, not waiting for my affirmation. I scrambled to gather my bag, a sudden rush of adrenaline flooding my system. This was actually happening. I was boarding a private jet with a powerful stranger named Kaelen Thorne. My ordinary life was taking a terrifying, exhilarating, and frankly ridiculous turn. He led me down a pristine, quiet corridor to an unmarked door that blended seamlessly into the wall. With a barely visible gesture, a hidden panel slid open, revealing a plush, softly lit lounge that felt immediately isolating from the world outside. Deep crimson leather armchairs were arranged around a low mahogany table. The air was thick with the scent of fine wood and something subtly masculine. It was silent, luxurious, and utterly private. "Make yourself comfortable, Elara," he instructed, gesturing toward an armchair. "A drink, something to eat." I shook my head, too overwhelmed to process anything. "No, thank you, Mr. Thorne, I'm fine." He settled into the chair opposite me, stretching his long legs out with an air of complete, relaxed authority. He unbuttoned his suit jacket, a movement that revealed a powerful frame beneath his crisp white shirt. Even at rest, he had a coiled intensity, like a mountain lion sunning itself. "Please call me Kaelen, and relax, you are quite safe here." The reassurance, though welcome, felt heavy, tinged with an unspoken promise. Safe from what? The storm, or something else entirely? I dismissed the unsettling thought, focusing on the soft leather beneath my fingers. I had a way out. That was all that mattered for now. We sat in silence for a few minutes, the only sound the soft hum of the lounge's air conditioning. I stole glances at Kaelen, trying to reconcile the powerful CEO with the man who had impulsively offered me a ride. He seemed to sense my scrutiny, and those amber eyes met mine, a small, knowing smile playing on his lips. "So Elara Vanya, the designer," he mused, his voice smooth. "Tell me about your orderly life." A faint blush crept up my neck. "It's not just orderly," I defended, a spark of my usual spirit returning. "I shape perception, I create visual narratives, it's important." He chuckled, a low, resonant sound. "Indeed, and what narratives do you prefer, Elara? The practical blueprints or the fantastical works of fiction?" "The fantastical mostly," I admitted, surprised by my honesty. "Escapism, I suppose. I like to imagine other lives, ones with a little more adventure." His gaze sharpened. "And what kind of adventure do you imagine for yourself?" The question caught me off guard. My life was safe, predictable. I hadn't truly imagined anything else. I just want to see my sister," I confessed, the raw honesty surprising even myself. "That's all I truly want right now." A flicker of something akin to understanding crossed his face, softening his sharp angles. "Family is the true anchor," he agreed, his voice surprisingly gentle. "A powerful tether in this tumultuous world. He leaned back, his gaze distant for a moment. My family is scattered. My work keeps me rooted here for now. I nodded, not knowing how to respond. The silence settled again, but this time it felt contemplative, less tense. Who was Kaelen Thorne, really? What was his story? And why had he plucked an ordinary designer from the jaws of airport despair? Just then a chime sounded, soft and discreet. Kaelen glanced at a small screen embedded in his armrest. His expression subtly shifted, a flicker of anticipation in his eyes. It appears the skis are beginning to acquiesce, he announced, rising to his feet with fluid grace. Our departure is imminent. My heart leaped. Imminent, this was the moment. My mundane life was about to collide with his extraordinary one, and I had no idea what to expect. As he strode toward the lounge's exit, I felt a strange mixture of exhilaration and pure dread. I was stepping onto an adventure I hadn't asked for, but one that felt undeniably fated. The mundane world of cancelled flights was already fading. My new reality, ushered in by a powerful stranger with amber eyes, was just beginning. I followed him, my backpack clutched tightly, stepping out of the shadows and into the unknown. We were leaving this prison, and I had a feeling that once I stepped onto that jet, nothing would ever be the same. Chapter 2. The tarmac was a slick, rain-drenched mirror reflecting the distant airport lights. A sleek black limousine was waiting for us, its engine a silent, barely there hum. The driver, a large man with a perfectly neutral expression, simply nodded to Kaelen before holding the rear door for me. I slid inside, the leather seats cool and smooth. Kaelen followed, the confined space instantly thickening with his commanding presence. The car pulled away from the main terminal, gliding effortlessly toward the private jet. Up close, the jet was even more breathtaking. Its matte black fuselage gleamed under the soft floodlights, and the single, elegant insignia, Thorne, was a stark declaration of unbridled power. I was stepping into a world I'd only ever seen in magazines. We ascended a short staircase, and as the jet's door hissed shut, I was enveloped in quiet luxury. The cabin was a masterpiece. Rich dark wood paneling, plush cream-colored chairs that looked more like lounge seating than airline seats, a small, fully stocked bar, and the faint, clean scent of new leather. Kaelen gestured toward an armchair. Make yourself comfortable, Elara. We should be airborne momentarily. I settled into the seat, sinking deep into the cushions. The window beside me offered a panoramic view of the storm-lashed runway. I watched as the ground crew completed their final checks, the flashes of their high-visibility gear a stark contrast to the surrounding gloom. The engines began to spool up, a deep, resonant hum that vibrated through the floor, the sound of immense contained power. Kaelen took the seat opposite me, leaning back with utter composure. He didn't even bother to buckle his seat belt. Have you flown privately before? He asked, a hint of amusement in his voice. I shook my head, managing a small, embarrassed smile. No, my trips are decidedly less grand. He nodded, his amber eyes seeming to acknowledge the understatement. I imagine so. Most people's are. Consider this an initiation. I watched out the window as the jet began to taxi, picking up speed with deceptive grace. It didn't lurch or rattle. It was a smooth, effortless glide. And when we lifted off the ground, the transition was so seamless I barely felt it. One moment we were grounded, the next we were soaring above the clouds, revealing a brilliant expanse of stars and a full moon in the now clear sky. The storm is behind us, Kaelen said, his voice a low, melodic rumble. Looks like we outran it. I stared out the window in awe. Below was the dark, stormy mess I had just escaped. Above, a serene, glittering galaxy. The world I knew felt 1,000,000 miles away. It's incredible, I breathed, feeling a lightness in my chest I hadn't felt in days. It is, he agreed, but he wasn't looking at the stars. He was looking at me, his gaze so intense it made my cheeks flush. Rest now, Elara. The flight will be a few hours. There are all the amenities you might require. We have a full meal service as well if you're hungry. My stomach, which had been tied in knots for hours, gave a low grumble in protest. I hadn't eaten since morning. A sandwich would be wonderful, I said, my voice softer than intended. He smiled faintly, and this time it wasn't the knowing, predatory smirk. It was a genuine, warm smile that softened his face, making him seem less like a mythical creature and more like a man. He rose and walked toward the small galley, moving with a quiet efficiency that spoke of inherent competence. He returned moments later with a silver tray. On it was a plate with an elegant-looking sandwich, a small bowl of fresh fruit, and a glass of chilled mineral water. "Roast beef on toasted rye," he announced, placing the tray on the small table between us. "I find simplicity is best when traveling." I took a bite of the sandwich. It was delicious, the beef tender, the bread warm and crunchy. My shoulders, which had been tense for so long, finally relaxed. "Thank you," I said sincerely, meeting his gaze. "This is so kind." He didn't respond immediately. He simply watched me eat, the intensity of his gaze never faltering. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was the look of a man who was truly seeing me, an active participant in the moment. It was unsettling and strangely thrilling. When I finished, I placed the tray back on the table. "You mentioned you're a CEO," I asked, trying to shift the focus from myself. "Yes," he replied, a shadow of his previous composure returning. "Thorne Industries. We specialize in global asset management and logistics." The answer was vague, but I didn't press. It was clear he didn't want to talk about his work. The hours passed in a comfortable silence. I dozed off for a while, the rhythmic hum of the engines and the smooth flight lulling me into a peaceful slumber. When I woke, the cabin was dark, save for the soft glow of a few reading lights. Kaelen was no longer in his seat. I sat up, a moment of panic seizing me, but then I saw him standing by the large picture window at the front of the cabin, staring out at the inky blackness. He seemed to sense my waking, turning his head slightly to acknowledge me. "Almost there," he said, his voice quiet. "We'll be landing in San Juan in less than an hour." I got up and walked over to join him, feeling a strange, undeniable pull toward him. The moonlight streamed through the window, illuminating his strong profile. He seemed powerful and yet incredibly solitary. "You look," I hesitated, then pushed the words out. "Sad." He stiffened just for a moment, and his gaze shifted to me, his amber eyes filled with an emotion I couldn't name. "I am simply reflective," he said, his voice now carefully controlled. "I can be a good listener," I offered, not knowing why I felt so compelled to reach out to this enigmatic man. "Designers are good at that. We listen to the stories people tell us and find the visual solution." A slow, tired smile touched his lips, but it didn't reach his eyes. "My story is not for polite conversation, Elara." I nodded, respecting the boundary, but a seed of curiosity had been firmly planted. There was a loneliness in him that mirrored the despair I had felt earlier, a deep-seated solitude that even his immense wealth and power couldn't fill. Just then a pilot's voice crackled over a speaker, a series of codes and flight information. Kaelen's expression hardened, his entire demeanor shifting from reflective to sharply focused. He was the CEO again, the Alpha, a man in command. "We are preparing for landing," he announced. "Please take your seat, Elara." I returned to my chair, buckling my seat belt as the jet began its smooth descent. We pierced through the cloud cover, and the lights of San Juan, a sprawling, glittering tapestry, appeared below. It was a beautiful, overwhelming sight. As the plane touched down on the runway with a soft bump, a wave of relief and anxiety washed over me. I was almost there. But what came after this flight? What would happen when I stepped back into the world and away from Kaelen Thorne? The thought of our parting, of the amber-eyed stranger disappearing back into his world, was surprisingly bittersweet. As the engines wound down, the silence in the cabin was broken only by the soft click of my seat belt. I had arrived, but something told me the real journey had only just begun. Chapter 3. The air of San Juan, even in the dead of night, was a thick, fragrant blanket, heavy with the scent of sea salt and blooming jasmine. It hit me like a wall as the jet door opened, a stark contrast to the climate-controlled luxury I'd just left. A new sedan, a gleaming black SUV this time, was waiting on the tarmac. As we descended the stairs, I felt a familiar pang of anxiety. The easy intimacy of the past few hours was about to end. Kaelen would go his way, and I would be left to figure out mine. He led me to the car, his hand a light but firm presence on the small of my back, a silent cue. The driver, a different man from the one in the States, but with the same stoic, professional demeanor, held the door open. I slid into the back seat and Kaelen followed, the atmosphere instantly charged. The drive was silent for a few minutes. I watched the city lights flash by, a dizzying blur. The quiet felt different now, not companionable but pregnant with unspoken finality. I was a fleeting guest, and the time for our easy conversation had passed. Finally, Kaelen spoke, his voice low and serious. "The car will take you to your connecting flight terminal, and from there you'll have an immediate transfer to St. Lucia. You'll be with your sister before noon." He reached into his inner suit pocket and pulled out a small silver clip, opening it to reveal a stack of crisp, large bills. "For any incidentals you might encounter, a change in flights, a cab, a meal." I flinched, a hot wave of embarrassment washing over me. "Oh no, Mr. Thorne, I can't. You've already done more than enough, the flight." He closed the clip with a definitive snap, his amber eyes fixed on me with an intensity that brooked no argument. "It is not a gift, Elara. It is a necessary precaution. I do not leave loose ends. You were stranded without resources. This is merely a means to ensure you reach your destination safely and without further distress." His words were logical, but his tone was laced with an unyielding finality. It was not an offer, it was a command. I knew that to refuse would be a grave insult, a challenge to his authority. So I swallowed my pride, nodded, and quietly took the clip. "Thank you," I whispered, the words feeling utterly inadequate. "You're welcome," he said, and a surprising warmth returned to his voice. "Now we have a short drive ahead. Is there anything you'd like to ask before we reach the main hub?" A sudden, jarring noise from the driver's side interrupted him. The car swerved violently, throwing me against the back of my seat. A piercing alarm blared. The driver, his face a mask of grim determination, fought the steering wheel. "What's happening?" I cried out, my heart hammering against my ribs. "It's an attack," Kaelen said, his voice strangely, terrifyingly calm in stark contrast to the sudden, coiled tension in his body. He was no longer the relaxed CEO. He was a hunter on high alert. "They've disabled the vehicle." Through the window I saw them. 2 other black SUVs had expertly boxed us in. Their windows were tinted, their forms menacing. The driver's door was ripped open, and 2 large men, their faces masked, pulled him out with brutal force, speaking in low, guttural tones I couldn't understand. My blood ran cold. This wasn't random. This was a targeted professional kidnapping. I shrank back into the seat, my mind screaming in silent, pure panic. Kidnapped. My ordinary life had just slammed into a terrifying movie. One of the masked men turned to our door, a glint of steel in his hand. He was tall and powerfully built, his movements quick and precise. I held my breath, bracing for impact. But Kaelen was faster. Before the man could even reach the handle, Kaelen's hand shot out, his fingers wrapping around my arm in a steel-like grip. "Stay low," he commanded, his voice a low, fierce growl. "Stay behind me, do not move." He opened his door not with a cautious push, but with a forceful shove that sent the masked man staggering back. Kaelen was out of the car in a flash, his suit jacket instantly shed, revealing a powerful, honed physique I hadn't even imagined. He moved with a speed and grace that was utterly inhuman, a blur of focused motion. I watched in terrified fascination as he engaged the men. He didn't just fight, he was a whirlwind of precision and power. A twist of a wrist, a sharp elbow, and one man was on the ground. Another strike, a powerful kick to the chest, and another collapsed, groaning in pain. The masked men, who had seemed so menacing moments ago, were no match for him. "Get out of the car, Elara," he roared, his voice thick with a primal feral quality. "Run." But I couldn't. I was frozen, paralyzed by disbelief and pure terror. I watched as Kaelen, my rescuer, my CEO, my private jet host, fought with a ferocity that was almost monstrous. He wasn't human. He couldn't be. This wasn't a man. This was an alpha. The intensity, the amber eyes, the raw, impossible power, it all clicked into place. My frozen state was broken by a sharp pulling sensation. The back door on my side was yanked open, and before I could even scream, a pair of strong, acrid-smelling arms grabbed me. The smell was sharp, metallic, like ozone and fresh blood. This wasn't one of the men Kaelen was fighting. This was a separate entity. The fight had been a diversion. No, I shrieked, struggling, kicking, but my efforts were useless against his overwhelming strength. He was a human wall, dragging me away from the chaos. I caught one last glimpse of Kaelen. He was still fighting, but his head snapped toward me, his amber eyes wide with a desperate, animalistic rage. "Elara!" he roared, his voice a low, terrifying sound that was barely human, a guttural command, a plea, the furious bellow of a betrayed hunter. But it was too late. My captor had me in a headlock, a hand clamped over my mouth. I was being pulled into a waiting, third vehicle, the door slamming shut behind me. The last thing I saw was Kaelen, his face a mask of pure fury, a flicker of something monstrous in his beautiful amber eyes. And then the car lurched forward, leaving the scene of the violent battle behind. I was gone, kidnapped. The mundane graphic designer from the small apartment was now a pawn in a terrifying game between alphas. My heart, which had just begun to warm, was now shattered into a million terrified pieces, and I knew with a bone-deep certainty that Kaelen Thorne would not stop until he found me. That terrifying thought was the only thing keeping me from falling apart completely. My life had just become a nightmare. Chapter 4. The car was a claustrophobic cage. I was a shaking, gasping mess in the back, my breath coming in short, panicked bursts. My captor, a hulking man with the cold, dead eyes of a predator, held me in a vise-like grip. He didn't speak. His silence was more terrifying than any threat. He simply stared forward, an impassive, unfeeling block of muscle. The metallic scent of him was strong, sickening. I tried to fight, to scream, to kick, but my struggles were pathetic, useless. My kidnapper just held me tighter, his fingers digging into my flesh, a silent warning that I was entirely, hopelessly under his control. I was a designer. I'd never fought anyone in my life. I had no idea how to escape this living nightmare. My mind endlessly replayed the last few moments. Kaelen's face contorted in fury, his inhuman roar, the impossible power with which he had dispatched the other men. He wasn't just a man, he was an alpha. The thought, terrifying yet strangely comforting, was the only thing anchoring me. He was a creature of immense power, and he was coming for me. I had to believe that. It was the only sliver of hope I had left. The car sped through the dark streets of San Juan, eventually turning onto a quieter highway that led away from the city's glittering lights. The urban sprawl gave way to dense, shadowy tropical forests, the trees looming over the road like silent, oppressive sentinels. The moon, so bright and beautiful just an hour ago, now seemed to hide behind the clouds, casting the world in a bleak grey gloom. My frantic heart began to slow to a dull, pounding thrum. The adrenaline was wearing off, replaced by a deep, cold, numbing fear. After what felt like an eternity, the car pulled off the highway and onto a long, winding dirt track. We drove for another 20 minutes before a large, foreboding estate came into view. The house was an old, sprawling mansion, its architecture hinting at a faded colonial grandeur that had long since been replaced by an air of disuse and decay. The windows were dark, like empty eyes, and the entire property was shrouded in an oppressive, unnatural silence. This was not a home. It was a prison. The car stopped in front of the main entrance, and my captor pulled me out with a rough, brutal yank, a stark contrast to Kaelen's firm yet gentle touch. He half dragged, half pushed me up the stone steps and through a large, creaking door. The inside was as desolate as the exterior. The air was stale and heavy, thick with the smell of dust and damp. I was led into a large, cold room with a fireplace that held only dead ashes. The only furniture was a simple cot in one corner. My captor shoved me onto the cot, the old springs protesting loudly under my weight. "You will wait here," he growled, his voice a low, gravelly sound. "He will be with you shortly." He didn't even bother to lock the door. There was no need. I was in the middle of nowhere with a stone-faced monster guarding the only way out. He was right, I would wait. But the chilling question remained, for whom? A short while later the door creaked open again. A tall, slender man entered the room. He was impeccably dressed in a white linen suit, his movements fluid and graceful, a stark contrast to my brutish captor. His hair was a shock of silver white, and his eyes, a piercing, inhuman icy blue, seemed to glitter in the dim light. He had an elegant, almost delicate face, but there was a cruel set to his lips, a chilling coldness in his gaze. This was another alpha. He looked at me, a lazy, disdainful smirk on his face, as if I were a particularly uninteresting insect. "So this is the little human he's been flaunting," he said, his voice as smooth as polished ice. "I must say I'm underwhelmed. I expected more, something to justify all the fuss." "Who are you?" I asked, my voice trembling yet holding firm. He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "My name is Cyril, and who am I? I am the man who will bring Kaelen Thorne to his knees." He took a slow, deliberate step closer, his icy blue eyes raking over me. "I assume you have no idea what is happening, do you, little Elara? You are just a stray you picked up at the airport." I didn't answer. My mind was reeling, a battle between two alphas, and I was the prize. "Kaelen," Cyril continued, his voice dripping with venom, "and I have a long, tedious history, a constant rival for power, for territory, for everything. I've tried to defeat him in business. I've failed. He is a worthy opponent." A flicker of twisted respect crossed his features. "But he has one fundamental weakness. He values things he shouldn't, and now he values you." The word values sent a strange jolt through me. Not possesses or owns, but values. It hinted at emotion, at something deeper than a simple show of force. My heart ached with a confused mix of fear and a strange, dizzying hope. Cyril leaned in, his face inches from mine. His breath was cold, and I instinctively pulled away. "He showed a soft side tonight, little human. He carried you. He protected you. That is not the Kaelen I know, and that softness, it will be his undoing." He straightened, a chilling smile on his lips. "He will come for you, Elara. He will come charging in here, desperate and reckless, and when he does, he will fall, and you, my dear, will be nothing more than collateral damage." He turned on his heel and walked out, leaving me alone in the cold, dusty room. Cyril's words echoed in my head, a terrifying prophecy. He had me not because I was important, but because I was a weakness, a lever he could use to destroy Kaelen. The raw, guttural cry I had heard from Kaelen on the street wasn't just rage. It was the cry of a hunter who had lost his mate, a protector who had failed. I was in immense danger, a pawn in a battle between two forces of nature. I could only wait for Kaelen to come for me, and pray that he was fast enough. Chapter 5. I don't know how long I was left alone in that cold, desolate room. Time stretched and warped, each moment feeling like an eternity. My mind was a terrifying whirlwind of thoughts and images. The fight on the street, Kaelen's inhuman strength, the pure fury in his amber eyes, and Cyril's chilling, casual declaration of war. I was a helpless bystander, caught in the crossfire of a battle I didn't understand. My fear, which had been a constant companion since the kidnapping, began to curdle into something else, a cold, simmering rage. I was a graphic designer, a simple, ordinary woman, yet these two powerful, ancient creatures had decided to use me as a pawn. They had upended my life, terrified me, and now had me locked in a dusty room as if I were a package to be delivered. I wasn't just scared anymore, I was angry. I was a person, not a thing. And I wasn't going to just sit here and wait to be rescued, or worse, to become collateral damage. I pushed myself off the cot and walked to the door. It was unlocked. My captor had left it open, a sign of his complete confidence that I couldn't escape. It was an insult. I peered out into the long, dark hallway. A single bare bulb cast a dim, flickering light on the peeling wallpaper. There was no one in sight. The guard must have been outside or in another room. This was my chance. Maybe not to escape entirely, but at least to move, to see what I was up against. I crept out of the room, my bare feet silent on the cold wooden floor. Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow, sent a jolt of panic through me. I moved with a stealth I didn't know I possessed, my instincts, honed by a lifetime of quiet focus, suddenly becoming a strange kind of weapon. I found my way to a set of stairs descending into a cavernous living area. This room was just as dusty and abandoned, save for a massive, ornate grandfather clock in the corner. The pendulum was still, the hands frozen at an unknown time, a perfect metaphor for my trapped situation. Suddenly a sound, the low, guttural murmur of voices. It was coming from a room down the hall, a room with a closed door and a sliver of light beneath it. My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew I should go back, hide, wait, but my curiosity mixed with my newfound anger was stronger. I had to know what they were talking about. I crept toward the door, pressing my ear against the wood, holding my breath. "He is on his way," a voice said. It was my captor, the brutal one. "He's not being subtle. He's coming at full speed, leaving a trail a blind man could follow." "Good," Cyril's voice replied, smooth and cold as ever. "Let him come. Let him exhaust his rage. Let him rush in here and give us what we want." "What if he brings his pack?" the guard asked, a hint of unease in his voice. Cyril laughed, a short, sharp sound. "He won't. I've sent a clear message to his elders. This is a personal matter, a challenge from one alpha to another. He will come alone to show his strength, to prove he is worthy of the prize." The prize, he meant me. I felt another wave of disgust and fury. I wasn't a prize. I wasn't a possession. My rage fueled a desperate urge to kick the door in, to scream at them. But I wasn't an idiot. I knew my place in this brutal food chain. I was at the very bottom. "He is fast, Cyril," the guard insisted. "He will be here before sunrise." "Then we shall be ready," Cyril responded, his voice filled with a chilling, triumphant glee. "We will have our little human ready for him. When he sees her, he will forget all his training, all his power. He will be nothing but a wild animal driven by instinct. And that is when we will strike." My legs felt weak. They were waiting for him. They had a plan. This wasn't a random kidnapping, it was a carefully orchestrated trap. A trap designed to exploit Kaelen's one weakness, his sudden, inexplicable feeling for me. He had been right. He did value me. And now that value was going to get him killed. I had to do something. I had to warn him. But how? I was a prisoner with no phone, no way of communicating. I stumbled back from the door, my mind racing. There had to be a way, a back entrance, a window, anything. I couldn't let him walk into this. I couldn't be the cause of his destruction. My heart, which had been so afraid of him just a few hours ago, was now aching for his safety. He was a dangerous, powerful creature, but he had shown me kindness. He had rescued me, and now he was putting his life on the line for me. My gaze fell on a tall, narrow window at the end of the hallway. It was boarded up, but maybe, just maybe. It was a slim chance, a desperate, foolish thought, but it was the only one I had. I had to try. My hands trembled, but it wasn't from fear anymore. It was from determination. I was no longer a victim. I was a woman on a mission, and that mission was to save the alpha who had saved me. Chapter 6. The window was a desperate long shot. It was old, the glass grimy, and thick splintered boards were nailed haphazardly across the frame. But it was my only hope. I grabbed a small, heavy iron doorstop from a dusty table and began to pry at the bottommost board. The wood was ancient and dry, and with a series of muffled thuds and frustrated grunts, I managed to loosen it enough to pull it away. The sound was deafeningly loud in the suffocating silence of the house, and I froze, my heart in my throat, listening for any sign of my captors. But there was nothing. They were too confident, too engrossed in their discussion about Kaelen's impending arrival to hear the frantic efforts of a desperate human. My hands were shaking as I tackled the next board and the next. Splinters dug into my palms, but I ignored the pain, driven by a singular, fierce purpose. I had to get out. I had to warn him. My sister's party was a distant, forgotten memory. My mundane life was a world away. I was in a race against time, a simple designer trying to save a powerful alpha. The irony was not lost on me, but it was overshadowed by the sheer urgency of my task. Finally, with a final, desperate heave, the last board gave way with a soft crack. I shoved the boards aside, and a rush of cool, fresh night air flowed into the stale room. I scrambled to the window, peering out into the darkness. We were on the second floor, and the drop was a good 20 feet to the ground below. There was no drain pipe, no easy way down. My heart sank. I was trapped. But then I saw it. A thick, gnarled vine, a forgotten part of the mansion's landscaping, snaked up the side of the stone wall, reaching almost to my window. It was old and thick, but it looked strong enough to hold my weight. It was a dangerous, precarious escape, but it was the only one I had. I reached out, testing the vine. It was rough beneath my fingers, but it felt solid, anchored firmly to the stones. I threw one leg over the windowsill, my body trembling with adrenaline and fear. I was a quiet woman who spent my days surrounded by screens. I was no action hero. Every instinct told me to stop, to go back, to wait for rescue. But the memory of Kaelen's face, his eyes full of pure protective rage, fueled me. I was not a damsel in distress. I was a warning siren. With a final, terrified deep breath, I swung my other leg out, clutching the vine with both hands. I began my descent, my muscles screaming with effort. My hands were raw, and my bare feet slipped on the rough stone wall. I was halfway down when a loud, furious growl from inside the house shattered the silence. "She's gone! The human, find her!" The guard's voice was a bellow of rage and panic. My heart leaped into my throat. They had found my empty room. They were coming for me. I gripped the vine tighter, my knuckles white, and slid the rest of the way down, dropping the last 5 feet with a bone-jarring thud. I landed on the soft, damp earth, a wave of relief washing over me. I had made it. But I didn't have time to celebrate. The back door of the mansion burst open, and a powerful spotlight cut through the darkness, sweeping across the ground. I scrambled to my feet and ran. I ran like I had never run before, deeper into the dark, tangled woods, the low branches whipping at my face, my bare feet stumbling over roots and stones. I could hear them behind me, the heavy footsteps and their low, angry growls. They were hunting me, and they were fast. Just as the panic began to consume me, I heard it, a sound that was both a terrifying promise and a hopeful prayer. It wasn't human. It was the sound of a wolf, a deep, resonant howl that seemed to shake the very foundations of the earth. It was a howl of rage, of triumph, and of a hunter on the trail. Kaelen, he was here. I stopped, gasping for breath, and looked up at the moon. It was a beacon in the night sky. And as I watched, a dark, powerful silhouette leaped from the shadows of a nearby tree and onto a high branch. It was not a man. It was a massive, magnificent black wolf, its fur shimmering under the moonlight. Its eyes, even from this distance, glowed with a familiar molten amber. He looked at me for a single, long moment, and a low, rumbling growl echoed through the woods. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise that he would protect me. Just then my pursuer, my brute of a captor, broke through the brush, his eyes fixed on me. A victorious, bloodthirsty smile spread across his face. "Got you, little pest," he snarled, taking a step toward me. But he never made it. A flash of black fur shot down from the tree, moving so fast it was a blur. There was a sickening, guttural snarl, a sharp crack of bone, and then the sound of a heavy body collapsing to the ground. The air was filled with the metallic tang of fresh blood. The wolf, Kaelen, stood over the still form of my captor, its massive body radiating a silent, lethal power. It turned its amber gaze to me, its eyes now soft, almost gentle. The fear I had felt for the past few hours finally broke, replaced by a torrent of relief and a strange, overwhelming emotion I couldn't yet name. He was here. He had saved me. He took a step towards me, and then another. I didn't move. I wasn't afraid, I was in awe. He was a myth, a monster, but he was my monster. He stopped a few feet away, his amber eyes fixed on mine, as if waiting for me to run, to scream, to reject him. But I didn't. I simply stood there, my hands raw from my desperate climb, my heart filled with a feeling so powerful it could only be love. I had run for him, and he had come for me. He was my alpha, my rescuer, and my heart, which had been broken and terrified for so long, was finally home. Chapter 7. He stood over the fallen body of my captor, a massive, magnificent creature of moonlight and shadow. His amber eyes, no longer filled with the fierce protective rage I had seen moments before, held a raw vulnerability that I felt deep in my bones. He was waiting for me to scream, to run, to fall apart. But I didn't. The fear had utterly evaporated, replaced by an overwhelming wave of relief and a fierce, possessive tenderness that surprised me. He was my alpha. And in that moment, nothing else mattered. I took a shaky step forward, then another, drawn to him by an invisible current of energy that pulsed between us. My bare feet, sore and scraped from the treacherous climb and the frantic dash through the woods, barely registered the sharp twigs. I just kept my eyes on his, on the gentle golden light that seemed to whisper, "It's okay. You're safe now." He watched me approach, a low, rumbling sound coming from his chest that was not a growl but something closer to a purr. When I was just a few feet away, he lowered his massive head and nudged my hand with his nose, a soft, velvet touch that sent a jolt of warmth through me. The fur was thick and soft, the scent of him a complex mix of pine, rain, and something that was just inherently him. I reached out, my trembling fingers hesitantly touching the top of his head, and he leaned into my touch, a low sigh escaping him. It was a moment of perfect understanding, of two souls connecting without the need for words. The silence was shattered by the distant sound of approaching footsteps and angry voices. The other guards. My moment of peace was over. Kaelen lifted his head, his ears swiveling to pinpoint the sound. A low, warning growl rippled through his chest. He backed away from me, his gaze never leaving mine, as if silently communicating his intent. He was going to lead them away, to protect me. I couldn't let him, not alone, not after what I had heard. "No," I cried out, my voice raw and hoarse. "Kaelen, don't go, it's a trap. Cyril said you would come alone." His amber eyes widened, a flicker of surprise and dawning understanding passing through them. He looked from me to the approaching sounds, a silent battle raging in his gaze. He had rushed in blindly, driven by instinct and rage, and I, the human he was supposed to be protecting, was the one warning him. He took a final step back, his body language shifting. He was no longer a lone predator but a strategist. He turned, his powerful form moving with an agile grace that defied his size, and disappeared behind a thicket of trees. I was alone again, but the terror was gone, replaced by a deep-seated trust. He hadn't abandoned me. He was just going to make sure the threat was dealt with before returning. I knelt behind a large fallen log, my heart still hammering in my chest, and listened. The sounds of the other guards came closer, their flashlights cutting through the darkness, their voices angry and confused. "Where is she? Where is that beast?" I heard one of them bellow. Then came a sudden, horrifying scream, followed by a sickening crunch of bone and a series of wet thuds. The sounds were over in a matter of seconds, a silent testament to Kaelen's incredible power and speed. I squeezed my eyes shut, a little sickened by the raw brutality of it all, but knowing in my core that it was necessary. He was doing this for me. He was fighting for me. The silence returned, more profound than before. I waited, my entire body coiled in anticipation. I didn't know how long it was before I felt his presence, a powerful, familiar energy that wasn't menacing but comforting. I opened my eyes, and there he was, standing a few feet away, no longer a wolf but a man. He was naked, his powerful, muscular body gleaming under the moonlight. His hair, dark and slick, framed a face that was no longer a mask of fury, but of deep concern. My gaze, despite myself, dropped to his form. His body was a masterpiece built for strength and speed, covered in old scars, a roadmap of a lifetime of battles. He was a perfect specimen, a literal alpha, and the sight of him, so exposed and raw, sent a dizzying heat through me. I instinctively looked away, a blush creeping up my neck. He seemed to sense my shyness, and a faint, almost shy smile touched his lips. He walked over to the unconscious body of my brute of a captor, who was still alive, just knocked out. With surprising dexterity, he pulled off the man's large black t-shirt and pants, tossing them over to me. "Here," he said, his voice a low, gravelly sound. "Put these on, we have to move." I scrambled to my feet, my mind reeling. The clothes were far too big, but they were better than nothing. I pulled on the drawstring pants and the t-shirt, which hung down to my knees. The fabric was rough and smelled of the forest, but it was a welcome shield against the cool night air. Kaelen, meanwhile, had found his own clothes in a nearby thicket, the same expensive suit from before, which he somehow managed to get back on in seconds. I didn't ask how. I was quickly learning that there were some things about his world I simply wouldn't understand. Cyril, he said, his voice now back to the commanding tone of the CEO, is the one who set this trap. He knew I wouldn't leave without you. He sent a challenge to my pack, elders, that this was a duel between alphas. He intended to separate me from my pack, then kill me. He walked over to me, his amber eyes studying my face with intense scrutiny. You saved me, Elara. Your warning, it gave me the edge I needed. I couldn't let you walk into a trap for me, I said, the words a jumble of raw emotion. My throat felt tight and my voice was barely a whisper. He said you valued me. A flicker of surprise, followed by a deep, fierce tenderness, crossed his face. He reached out and gently cupped my cheek, his thumb brushing away a stray tear I hadn't even realized was falling. I do, Elara, he said, his voice a low, broken rumble that sent a shiver through me. I do. I don't know why or how, but the moment I saw you in that airport, my inner wolf, my alpha, he recognized you. He claimed you. He wanted to protect you from that storm, from everything. He paused, his gaze never leaving mine. You are more than just a human, you're my Luna, my mate. The words, so simple and so profound, hung in the air between us. Mate. I had read these words in the fantasy novels I loved so much, but to hear them directed at me, a simple designer from a real-life alpha, was almost unbearable. It wasn't just a physical attraction, it was a soul-deep connection, a primal, undeniable bond. I don't understand, I whispered, the words catching in my throat. How, we just met, I'm just Elara. He smiled, a heartbreakingly gentle expression that made my own heart ache with a fierce, protective love. The bond doesn't need time, little one. It is simply there. It is the universe's way of telling us we belong together. You are my other half, the one meant to stand beside me, to be the strength to my power, the calm to my storm. He leaned in, his forehead resting gently against mine. Cyril wanted to use you as a weakness, but he was wrong. You are not a weakness, Elara. You are my greatest strength. The scent of him, the feel of his skin against mine, the overwhelming power of his words, it was all too much. I leaned into his touch, a soft sob escaping my lips. It was a cry of relief, of acceptance, of a love so profound it felt like it had existed for centuries. The mundane girl I was a day ago was gone. A new woman was rising from the ashes, a woman who had a purpose, a woman who was a Luna. He held me, his arms strong and comforting, until my sobs subsided. When I finally pulled back, I looked up at him, my heart filled with a mixture of terror and exhilaration. What now? I asked. Cyril will still come for you and for me. Kaelen's expression hardened, his amber eyes filling with a cold, predatory gleam. Yes, he will, he said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. He has now crossed a line. He has touched what is mine. He has no idea the mistake he has made. This is no longer a duel. This is a matter of vengeance, and no one messes with an alpha's mate and lives to tell the tale. He pulled me closer, his arm wrapped tightly around my waist, a possessive gesture that felt less like a cage and more like a fortress. We will go to my pack, to my territory, he said, his gaze fixed on the mansion in the distance, a look of pure, unadulterated fury on his face. This war was waged on his terms. Now it will be ended on mine, and you, my Luna, will be with me every step of the way. And I knew in that moment that I would. The designer had been left behind in that cold, desolate airport. The human girl, the one who was just trying to get home, was no more. A new version of me had been born, forged in the terror of a kidnapping and the fierce, protective love of an alpha. I was his Luna, and together we would face whatever darkness came our way. The mundane world was over. The adventure was just beginning. Chapter 8. The remnants of the battle lay silently behind us, a stark reminder of the world that had just shattered my reality. My feet, still clad in my captor's oversized pants and t-shirt, carried me through the trees with Kaelen by my side. He moved with a quiet, lethal grace, his senses on high alert, his hand never leaving the small of my back, a constant, solid presence, a physical anchor to the man who was now my alpha. The fear of being chased was still there, a cold knot in my stomach, but it was overshadowed by the fierce, exhilarating feeling of being with him, of knowing that he would protect me with every fiber of his being. We walked for what felt like miles, the darkness of the woods a thick, comforting blanket. My earlier terror had been replaced by a kind of numb clarity. The mundane world was gone. My life was now a terrifying, beautiful, and utterly real fantasy. After what felt like an eternity, we broke through the tree line and came to a secluded road. A sleek black luxury sedan was parked in the shadows, its engine running. The same stoic driver from the airport, a man I now recognized as one of Kaelen's pack, stepped out and opened the rear door for us without a word. The inside of the car was a sanctuary of warmth and luxury. The leather seats swallowed me whole, and the soft ambient light was a welcome change from the harsh darkness of the forest. I sank back against the headrest, my body finally giving in to the exhaustion that had been building for hours. Kaelen slid in beside me, and the air in the confined space instantly thickened with his presence. "We're going to my territory," he said, his voice a low rumble. He reached over and gently pulled a blanket from the back of the seat, draping it over my shoulders. "Rest, Elara, you are safe now." But I couldn't rest, not yet. I had too many questions. I turned to him, my gaze meeting his amber eyes in the dim light. "What is a lunar?" I asked, the word feeling both foreign and intimately a part of me. "What does it truly mean?" He was silent for a moment, his gaze fixed on my face as if searching for something. "It means many things," he finally said, his voice soft. "It means my other half, it means the calm to my storm. An alpha is meant to lead, to fight, to protect his pack. But a true alpha is nothing without his Luna. She is the heart of the pack, the one who brings balance and peace. She is our strength and our salvation." He paused, his gaze dropping to my lips before returning to my eyes. "She is the one who accepts the wolf." The words sent a shiver through me. The responsibility of it was immense, terrifying, and yet I felt a deep sense of purpose. "What about Cyril?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "What about your pack? What will they think?" His jaw tightened, a hard, cold look entering his eyes. "Cyril is nothing more than a ghost now. He will be dealt with. And as for my pack," he said, his voice a low growl, "they will accept you because you are mine. Any wolf who dares to question that will face the full force of their alpha." His arm came around me, pulling me closer to him, his scent a comforting, possessive blanket. I leaned into him, resting my head on his broad shoulder, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt truly at peace. The long drive was a blur of exhaustion and quiet conversation. I learned about his world, the ancient pacts that govern the supernatural world, the intricate web of politics and power that he had to navigate daily. He told me about his father, the previous alpha, who was killed in a rogue attack, and how he had to step up and lead his pack at an incredibly young age. The immense weight he carried, the constant pressure to be strong, to never show a single moment of weakness. It made me realize that the man I saw in the airport, the one who seemed so effortlessly powerful, was a man who was always on guard, always fighting. "That's why Cyril thought he could get to me through you," he said, his voice a soft rumble against my hair. "He saw that I was showing a weakness, a softness. He didn't understand that you weren't my weakness, you were my strength." The words made my heart ache. My simple, mundane life had prepared me for none of this, and yet somehow it had prepared me for him. I had always been drawn to fantastical worlds, to stories of alphas and lunas, of fated mates and forbidden love. It was as if my entire life had been a prelude, a quiet, patient wait for him to arrive. As the miles passed, I felt a new sense of power growing within me, a subtle humming energy that I didn't recognize. The world outside the car felt different now, more vibrant, more alive. I could sense the presence of animals in the trees we passed, their energy a low, pulsing thrum in my blood. It was as if a part of me that had always been dormant was finally waking up, responding to the nearness of its mate. I must have drifted off to sleep because the next thing I knew the car was pulling to a stop. I woke with a jolt, disoriented for a moment, but then I saw Kaelen, his amber eyes fixed on me, a soft, fond smile on his face. "We're here, my Luna," he said, his voice filled with a powerful, possessive tenderness. "Welcome home." I looked out the window. The car was parked on a high cliff overlooking a vast valley. Below, a small city nestled in the heart of a dense, ancient forest. It wasn't a sprawling metropolis, but a city built of dark stone and rich wood, lit by flickering lanterns that cast a warm, inviting glow. This was his territory. This was his pack. The air was filled with a powerful, intoxicating scent, 1,000 different wolf scents all melding together. But above them all, I could sense Kaelen's, strong and dominant, a comforting anchor in the sensory overload. As the car door opened, the cool night air washed over me. I stepped out, my heart pounding in my chest. The moon was high and full, bathing the entire valley in a soft, ethereal glow. And then I saw them. They were waiting. A large group of people were standing at the edge of the cliff, watching our arrival with silent, stoic expressions. Their eyes, some amber, some deep grey, some brown, were all fixed on me, the human who had arrived with their alpha. The crowd parted, and a tall, elderly man with a shock of silver-grey hair and a face etched with the lines of age and wisdom stepped forward. He wasn't a brute like Cyril, but he radiated a quiet, ancient power that made my knees feel weak. He looked at me, then at Kaelen, his gaze deep and searching. "Kaelen," he said, his voice a low, resonant baritone, "we felt you coming, but you have brought a human into our lands. You know the rules." His gaze returned to me, filled with a mixture of suspicion and profound curiosity. "She carries the scent of our alpha, but she is human. Why is she here?" I instinctively moved closer to Kaelen, my hand reaching for his, a silent plea for reassurance. He took my hand, his fingers intertwining with mine in a show of ownership and a silent promise of protection. He looked at the old man, his stance firm, his amber eyes unwavering. "Elder Matthijs," he said, his voice ringing with the authority of a king, "this is not just a human, this is Elara, and she's my mate, my Luna." The words hung in the air, a final, definitive declaration. The crowd of wolves erupted into a confused chorus of murmurs, their faces a mix of disbelief, shock, and wary acceptance. My heart pounded a frantic beat against my ribs. The true test of our relationship, the true beginning of our new life, was not in the quiet of a private jet or the chaos of a battle. It was here, in the cold, clear moonlight, facing the skeptical eyes of a pack that had never known a human Luna. And I knew with a bone-deep certainty that this was the moment our real story began. Chapter 9. The words hung in the crisp night air, a thunderous, irreversible declaration. "This is Elara, and she's my mate, my Luna." A wave of palpable shock rolled through the gathered pack. Murmurs like a sudden wind through the pines rippled through the crowd. Some wolves looked at me with open disbelief, their human eyes wide and unaccepting. Others looked at Kaelen, their alpha, their expressions a mix of confusion and silent questioning. This was their leader, the embodiment of their strength and the face of their future, standing with a human woman who smelled of design studios and the sea, not the familiar scent of a born wolf. Elder Matthijs, the pack elder, was the first to break the tension. "Kaelen," he said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that commanded attention, "you speak of a human as if she were destined. The moon goddess gave us a Luna of the pack, not one of the humans who are often blind to our kind." The accusation, though softly spoken, was like a physical blow. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, a clear sign of their dissent. I felt my hand tighten in Kaelen's, a silent plea for reassurance. His fingers squeezed mine in return, a promise of his unwavering support. He did not waver. He simply stood taller, his presence radiating an undeniable power that silenced the crowd more effectively than any command. "The goddess works in mysterious ways, Matthijs," Kaelen said, his voice firm and laced with authority. "Elara is not of the pack, but she is of my soul. I did not choose her, she was chosen for me." He paused, his amber eyes sweeping over the crowd, daring anyone to challenge him. "She is my mate, and my mate is your Luna. You will treat her with the respect she deserves." A young, muscular warrior with a braid in his dark hair, his stance radiating insolence, stepped forward. "Alpha, with all due respect, how can a human, a creature of weakness, lead us? She can't even shift. She has no inner wolf to guide her. She is a liability, not a Luna. The audacity of his words sent a jolt of ice through me. He was right. I was weak. I was human. I couldn't fight. My heart sank, the confidence I had found in the forest threatening to crumble. Before I could even think, Kaelen's gaze hardened, and a low, menacing growl rumbled in his chest. It was a sound I had heard before, a sound of a predator preparing to strike. "Her strength is not in her form, Jax," Kaelen said, his voice dangerously low. "It is in her heart, and her power is far beyond your understanding. Step back before you make me prove it." The look in Kaelen's eyes was a clear warning, and Jax, to his credit, seemed to understand it perfectly. He took a hesitant step back, but his sneer remained. The pack was divided, and the tension was a physical weight in the air. Mathis, sensing the growing unrest, held up a hand. "Enough, the Alpha has spoken." But a Luna's power must be shown to the pack, not just spoken of. Tomorrow, at the dawn ritual, we will see if the human has the spirit of a true Luna. His gaze turned to me, a calculating, challenging look in his ancient eyes. "If you are truly a Luna, then you will calm the descent, Elara. You will show us that you are not just his mate, but the mate of this entire pack. You must prove yourself worthy." My stomach clenched. I wasn't just here to be accepted, I was here to earn my place. The thought was terrifying, but as I looked at Kaelen's unwavering face, I felt a familiar well of strength deep inside me. He had risked everything for me. The least I could do was fight for him. "I will," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I will prove my worth, for Kaelen, for this pack." A flicker of surprise, followed by a fleeting look of respect, crossed Mathis's face. He nodded once and then turned away, the crowd dispersing into the night, their eyes still fixed on me with a mix of curiosity and hostility. We were left alone on the cliffside, with the vast glowing valley below and the silent, watchful pack moving in the shadows. Kaelen turned to me, his amber eyes filled with a fierce, protective tenderness. "Elara," he said, his voice a low, reassuring rumble. "You don't have to do this. We can leave. We can find a safe place for you away from all of this." I shook my head, a sense of purpose I'd never felt before coursing through me. "No, this is my home now and you are my family. I'm not going to hide. I'm going to fight for my place here, for us." I reached up and gently touched his cheek. "Besides," I said, a small, genuine smile on my lips, "I'm a designer. We're tougher than we look when it comes to defending our work." He chuckled, a rich, deep sound that made my heart leap. He leaned down and pressed a soft, lingering kiss to my forehead. "My brave Luna," he murmured, his voice filled with a powerful emotion. "My brave, brave Luna." He led me down a winding stone path towards the heart of the village. The pack's homes were built directly into the side of the cliffs, seamlessly integrated into the landscape. We walked past flickering lamps, and I could feel the eyes of the pack on me from every window and doorway. I felt an odd sense of calm. The fear was still there, a tiny tremor in my hands, but it was overshadowed by a fierce resolve. Kaelen led me to his home, a sprawling, elegant lodge built into the largest section of the cliff. The interior was warm, with a roaring fire in a massive stone hearth and comfortable furniture made of dark wood and soft leather. It was a home, not a prison, and as Kaelen led me inside, I felt an almost overwhelming sense of relief. He led me to a large bedroom with a plush bed and a private bathroom. He handed me a clean t-shirt and a pair of sweatpants. "Sleep, Elara," he said, his voice filled with a tenderness that made my heart ache. "You have a big day tomorrow." I looked at him, my gaze falling on the hard lines of exhaustion etched around his eyes. "What about you?" I asked. "You haven't rested at all." He smiled faintly, a tired but resolute look on his face. "An Alpha's work is never done. I have to prepare for the morning. I'll be close by. You're safe here. No one will get to you." He left and I was alone again, but the loneliness was gone. The room was empty, but it felt filled with his presence, with the promise of his return. I changed into the comfortable clothes, and as I lay on the soft, luxurious bed, my eyes drifted shut. I was no longer the lonely designer from the small apartment. I was the mate of a powerful Alpha, facing a skeptical pack with a war on the horizon. My life had changed in a matter of days, from a mundane routine to a terrifying, thrilling adventure. I was a Luna, and tomorrow I would have to prove it. The thought should have terrified me, but instead it filled me with a quiet, exhilarating purpose. I had a purpose now. I had him, and I would face anything for us. Chapter 10. The dawn ritual was a solemn, ancient affair. The pack was gathered in a vast clearing, with the first pale light of morning spilling through the canopy of the ancient trees. The air, crisp and cold, was thick with tension. Every single eye was on me, 1,000 gazes, some curious, some hostile, all judging. My heart, despite my brave words to Kaelen, felt like a nervous hummingbird in my chest. I was a designer. I had never spoken in front of a crowd, let alone a pack of wolves who were ready to tear me apart. Kaelen stood beside me, a solid pillar of strength and reassurance. His hand was not in mine this time, a deliberate decision to show the pack that this was my test alone, not his. He was still the alpha, radiating a quiet, coiled energy that warned everyone to keep their distance, but he was allowing me to face this on my own terms. Mathais, the pack elder, stood before me, his eyes holding no malice but a challenge I couldn't ignore. "The pack awaits, Elara," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Show us why you are worthy of our alpha. Show us the spirit of a Luna." My mind went blank. What was I supposed to do? I couldn't fight, I couldn't roar a command, I was just a human. But then I looked at Kaelen, at the unwavering faith in his amber eyes. And a quiet strength I had never known I possessed swelled in my chest. I was not meant to fight. I was meant to bring peace. I took a deep breath, and as I exhaled I thought not of my fear, but of the peace I felt when Kaelen held me, of the quiet sense of belonging that had settled in my soul. I projected that feeling, that calmness, that serenity outward. I didn't know how I was doing it, but I could feel a soft, warm energy radiating from me, touching each and every member of the pack. The effect was immediate. The restless shifts in the crowd stilled. The hostile glares softened into looks of confusion, then something else, something akin to awe. Jax, the young warrior who had challenged me, felt his sneer melt away, his face replaced with a look of quiet wonder. I felt their emotions like a symphony of vibrations, the lingering anger, the deep-seated skepticism, the fear. And with every beat of my heart, I worked to calm them, to soothe them, to show them a side of the moon that was not just powerful, but gentle and nurturing. A collective sigh swept through the crowd, a sound of release, of tension finally breaking. Mathais, watching me with a look of profound surprise, took a small, hesitant step forward. He bowed his head, a sign of respect that brought a wave of silent awe from the crowd. "The spirit of the moon goddess is strong within you, human," he said, his voice filled with newfound respect. "You have proved yourself. The pack accepts its Luna." A cheer, at first hesitant and then uproarious, erupted from the crowd. I felt a wave of dizzying relief so powerful it almost knocked me off my feet. Kaelen was there in an instant. His arm around me, his amber eyes filled with pride. "My Luna," he whispered, and this time the word was not a declaration but a promise. But the moment of triumph was short-lived. A sudden, chilling scent, a sharp tang of ozone and cold malice, cut through the pack's peaceful aura. Every wolf in the clearing went rigid, their heads snapping up. An alarm sounded, a series of low, warning howls from the perimeter guards. "Cyril," Kaelen growled, his body coiling, his face a mask of furious determination. He turned to me, his voice a low command. "Get to the bunker, Elara. Now." But I shook my head, my hand clutching his arm. "No," I said, my voice firm. "I'm not leaving you. I am your Luna. I will be with you." The sound of snapping twigs and the furious snarls of attacking wolves erupted from the tree line. Cyril's voice, a chilling, triumphant laugh, cut through the chaos. "I told you, Kaelen. You chose a human. Your weakness will be your downfall." He emerged from the trees, a monstrous albino wolf, its white fur stained with blood. He was larger than any other wolf I had ever seen, his eyes a cold, piercing blue that held a promise of pure, unadulterated evil. Behind him, a legion of rogue wolves, their coats ragged and their eyes filled with a crazed hunger, poured into the clearing. The final battle had begun. The sounds of the battle were deafening, a symphony of snarls, growls, and the sickening thud of bodies colliding. Kaelen, with a final, reassuring look at me, shifted. He transformed into a massive, powerful black wolf, the embodiment of a protective and lethal force. He charged towards Cyril, a blur of pure, unadulterated fury, and the two alphas crashed together in a violent explosion of teeth and claws. I stood in the center of the chaos, helpless to fight but not helpless to help. I focused on the feelings of the pack, the waves of fear and rage that threatened to consume them. I began to hum, a soft, soothing melody I used to hum when designing late at night, and as the sound left my lips, a soft, warm light began to emanate from me. I was not a warrior but a healer, and with every note I calmed their panicked hearts, giving them the strength to fight on. I touched a wounded wolf and felt a jolt of energy leave my fingertips, his whimpers of pain softening as the wound began to close. My power was not a weapon, but a balm, a silent support that strengthened my mate and his pack. The battle raged around me, but my focus was on the two alphas. They were a maelstrom of power, a whirlwind of black and white fur, their snarls and growls echoing through the clearing. Cyril was fast, but Kaelen was a force of nature. He was fighting with an ancient fury I had never seen, fueled not by revenge, but by a deep, unwavering need to protect me. With a final, earth-shaking roar, Kaelen pinned Cyril to the ground, his teeth bared, poised to deliver the final blow. I ran towards them, my heart in my throat. "Kaelen, no," I screamed. "Don't kill him, he's not worth it." He hesitated, his amber eyes filled with a murderous rage that was barely contained. But then he looked at me, at my tear-streaked face, and the rage softened. He saw not just a human but his Luna, the one who held his heart in her hands. He would not become a monster, not for him. He bit down, not on Cyril's throat, but on his front leg, a swift, final move that broke the bone with a sickening crack. Cyril let out a howl of pain and defeat. He was broken, physically and mentally. He would never be a threat to Kaelen or his pack again. The battle was over. Kaelen shifted back into his human form, his powerful body bruised and bleeding, but his amber eyes filled with an overwhelming sense of relief. He stumbled towards me, and I ran to him, my arms wrapping around his neck. I held him, my fingers tracing the scars on his back, and for a moment we were just two people, a man and a woman, holding each other in the aftermath of a war. The pack, silent and reverent, watched us. They had seen their alpha's power, his mercy, and his love for a human. They had seen their Luna not as a weakness, but as a silent, powerful force that had calmed them in the chaos and strengthened their alpha. There was no more dissent, no more questions. I was their Luna, and he was their alpha. The morning sun, now high in the sky, cast a warm, golden light over the clearing. The war was over. The mundane designer from the small apartment had found her destiny, not in a storybook, but in the heart of a powerful alpha. I had gone to see my family, but I had found my true family instead. I had been a designer living a life of quiet color palettes, but now I was a part of the greatest story of all. I looked at Kaelen, his hand gently cupping my cheek, and I knew that our adventure had only just begun. The future was unwritten, but with him by my side, I knew it would be a beautiful, feral fantasy. We were home, and we were together. Thank you for joining me on this incredible journey. From a mundane airport layover to the heart of an alpha's territory, Elara and Kaelen's story is a testament to the power of fated love. Their path was paved with danger, but they faced it together, proving that a Luna's strength is not in her claws but in her courage. The fight is over, but their story is far from finished. The challenges of leading a pack, building a life, and protecting their future await. If you were captivated by this thrilling werewolf romance, you won't want to miss what comes next. Subscribe to Serena's romance story and turn on notifications to be the first to know when the next story begins.